Welcome to Offshore Explorer with Scott Dodgson. We've been a little hit and miss, a little intermittent here, doing our show every other week. Primarily the reason is I pretty much do the show by myself. And think up the stories, tell the stories, put everything together. I have just published a book called The Mosaic Artist, which you can pick up on Amazon. Kindle read for like 99 cents. And it's a great short story. If you've been listening to our podcasts, you know I did the Mosaic Artist podcast last year. It's a great little story. It's very emotional. It's based on true story. It's eventually going to be fit into a larger book called Dry Port Series. And these are stories that I heard while pretty much I was in port. And in some cases, the stories are all sort of oriented around ports that didn't exist or don't exist today. They're dried up. They're inland and they're not near the water anymore, but they have a very significant place in history. Sevilla is where it takes place in the south of Spain. Once the most powerful port in the world. That's where all the gold that was taken from the New World went through. And this is a story about the people who live there. And in particular, a young boy named Carlos, coming of age story. So I just published that, and I'm working on another one, which has also been a podcast, The Casket Salesman. And The Casket Salesman is a story about myself and my grandfather, who literally was a casket salesman. And I spent 2 weeks driving around in his 1959 powder blue Rambler, visiting funeral homes. And my single thought about the whole trip was I wanted to see a dead person. I was 12. It's what 12-year-olds do. And so that's kind of an exciting story. I will publish that before Christmas. I'll let you all know what the deal is with that. And that's very exciting. And then I have a bunch of other stories that I have done based on the podcast because many of the stories I write out beforehand before I get on the air. And I put those together. They're being edited right now, and I expect to publish a book of those early next year, possibly in the spring. And there'll be 14 or 15 stories in there. I'm also doing a couple of other things in terms of writing. I do a lot of writing, and so the podcast is set because there's great enthusiasm for listening to the podcast, but it's very time-consuming, and I'm trying to kind of balance out how things go. Plus, I just had my birthday, which, amazingly, I somehow made it to 69 years old. I've been told that 70 is the new 50. I'm going to buy that, and I'm going to chant that to myself. A lot of years at sea. A lot of stories to tell, and this seems like a good time in my life to tell some of these stories. So today, I wanted to talk about training stories, and anybody who does any kind of boat delivery or distance traveling with friends will recognize some of the problems. And I'm kind of always thought I was a really good trainer, and I've probably trained, I would guess probably 40, 50 mates. I mean, guys who became first mates and were in the marine industry for quite a while in one capacity or another. Many of them became captains. I know a few of them kind of went the path of becoming an engineer and being in the engineering slot. If you don't know, there's a couple of different ways you can take your Marine career. One of which is to start out as a common seaman, then work up to able-bodied seaman, and then you can work up from there, and that's where your choice comes. You can either go to the engine room, and everybody sort of has all these experiences being in the engine room, learning about how to do engines, especially on commercial ships, and even if you're just your run-of-the-mill 27-foot Catalina, you're going to be in the engine room. You're going to, be making sure your pumps are correct and the bilge is clean, and you'll change the oil, and there's a lot of procedures that you're going to go through, and checking batteries and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And that's a part of in a kind of microscopic way, sort of where the industry is. So you have two choices. One of which is you stay in engineering and become an engineer, which is, by the way, a great job. And then the second is you can move to able-bodied seaman to mate, and that means you get your deck experience. And then from mate, you can move to captain. So there's there's chief engineers, the top one in the technical part. You go onto an oiler, which is a different branch, and all these things. This is sort of the career path. But one of the main things is training people to help you make a delivery or help you just get from point A to point B. And let's be honest, there's a lot of people out there that say they have a lot of experience in sailing, but they really don't. And you have to be very critical and find out what sort of skills people have. And you have to be able to come back and say, okay, we can do this skill, and we can improve on this. And I have 3 stories that I want to tell. And the first of the stories is I got a job delivering a very old restored Chris Craft from Los Angeles to actually Oakland. And for those who don't know, that's against the current. It's up, going straight up the hill, and it can be a very, very rough ride. But it can also be okay. And it's a transit that a lot of people make here on the west coast of America and west coast of California. And it can be rough and tumble. There's not a lot of places to duck into if you catch some bad weather. And I want to tell you about, in particular, this mate, who I will call Jerry the Astronaut. Now, Jerry and I were pretty good friends. He lived on a boat in the same marina that I did. He was a vet from Iraq and Afghanistan, and as many of you know, that I cut my teeth in Vietnam. So there was a lot of experience. I do spend a great deal of time, off and on, these years, talking to vets from Iraq and Afghanistan with PTSD. I suffered from it myself many, many, many years ago when I got back from doing my duty. And so we became fast friends, and he was going through some struggles, and I became his sounding board and sort of his therapist, as you might understand that. And he was really into sailing. He had bought this nice little sailboat, and he was working on it, and I had actually helped him put a new engine in. We had pulled it out, the old engine, which was a piece of you-know-what, and we put it in, and he put it all together. He's a really, really smart guy, like really smart. And he had a great history and a very interesting family. His dad was a horse trainer in Kentucky, and he trained racehorses. and his mom was just, a great mom and all the rest of this kind of stuff. And he was a really solid kid. And I made the mistake, and this is on me, of not really understanding what his skill level was for buying a boat. Now, anybody can buy a boat, and that's usually what happens. And they hope when they get the boat that they're going to learn stuff. But there's a lot of stuff that you have to learn that you may not necessarily pick up on your own. Somebody has to teach you these things. I mean, very simple things, like tying a bowline or tying your boat off on the dock on a cleat and doing it properly. People can look at it and it's a puzzle. How to set your sails, how to hoist your sails, different points of leverage that you can use when sailing, and things to look at. And so anyway, I thought, because Jerry was a really, smart guy and a good guy, I thought he had a lot more experience than he did. And assuming was my problem, I shouldn't have done that. So I got this job to deliver this restored Chris Craft. Had gas engines in it. It had the Ford Hemis in them, or whatever they were called, and they were great engines. Everything, the engine room was just perfectly clean. It was really a great little boat. And it was wood, well appointed. And so I took the job on. And as you deliver boats, and you learn to deliver boats, and you learn to train your crew, you realize that one of the big points is delivering boats that are wood. They're a little bit different than a fiberglass boat. So you have to spend some time. You got to be a little bit more careful, especially with the boat. This boat, I think, was 1960, so she was a pretty old boat, and you just don't know what sort of problems, planking. A very good friend of mine was literally had a through hole that he woke up one morning on his boat and it was leaking, and he thought, hey, I better get this thing over to the yard. And on the way to the yard, in the middle of Long Beach Harbor, the boat sank. And there wasn't anything you could do about it. And it turned out that unbeknownst to the surveyor and unbeknownst to him, that once that through hole started to rot away, it sounded good, they didn't x-ray it, but it just popped, and the through hole just popped out of the boat, and the whole side of the boat was completely rotten, and nobody really could. It didn't look like it would be rotten, but these are sort of some of the mysteries that you would get with an older boat, and there's ways to check that. Maybe I'll do a podcast on restoring wood boats and how to check them and make sure the wood is solid, because in most cases they can be really solid. So anyway, Jerry he and I had talked a lot, and he had decided that he didn't know what he was going to do, and his wife at the time was having some serious mental problems. And she was just crazy, gorgeous girl, absolutely gorgeous girl, very tragic. And she was really having a very, very hard time, and he was having a very, very hard time. They were living together on this boat in the marina. They were trying to get their life. They were young. They were trying to get their lives together. He was dealing with PTSD. He was dealing with, where am I going to go in my life? She was supporting him, but was really suffering. She was really suffering from schizophrenia, and it was getting worse. And she started to, smoke a little too much, drink a little too much, and she was just kind of losing the narrative of her life. And Jerry knew this. And he was struggling with it because I'm very sure that he loved her very dearly. So I got this job to deliver this boat, and I said, why don't you come with me? I'll pay you. You can come as a mate, give yourself some time away, and we'll make the trip up. And he enthusiastically jumped on the job. And I'm assuming that he had sailed before. He owned a sailboat. He seemed to move around the boat pretty well. I had helped him with his engine, putting that and taking it out. And, he just seemed confident about what he was doing. And so I just said, "Oh, okay, great. This is good." And he was a super smart kid. And so anyway, we went over, we checked the boat out, and we left very early in the morning, and off we went. Actually, no, I'm going to have to revise that, because with Jerry, we didn't leave Marina Del Rey. With Jerry, we actually went down to San Diego to pick up the boat, where I met the owner, who I had known from a previous boat delivery. He had bought another boat, very good friend of mine now. And so we went down to San Diego, got the boat, and then we took it up. Now, between San Diego and Los Angeles, it's usually pretty cool. Not too much in terms of bad weather. We fairly benign weather in Southern California. And as I have said before, that, we're running against the current on the way up. But in a power boat, especially those two little gas engines are, humping along and pushing the boat. And we were doing a nice, I kept it around, between 12 and 15 knots. It was just enough to keep the nose up, not too much. The boat couldn't plane. It was just a little too heavy. And so it was just a nice, comfortable RPM to run at. And off we went. And of course, Jerry was really excited about the thing. I let him drive. I showed him what to do. I said, this is what you're going to do on the trip at night. You're going to sit up here at the helm, and you're going to look out for that. I showed him how to operate the radar. We set the radar at about 30 miles from San Diego up to L.A., Marina Del Rey. We have to go past Pendleton. And sometimes they run the Navy and the Marines, they run operations out there. So you have to be watching them. They're watching you for sure. But, you have a path, and it's all pretty cool. And then once you get up a little bit further, you've got off of Huntington Beach, you have some oil rigs. So you have to kind of pay attention to them, because there's service boats going back and forth. There's a lot of things going on out there. And then once you get past Huntington Beach and you start your way up, you come up to the port of Long Beach. And that's where you have all the big container ships coming in and coming out. Now, the cool thing about Long Beach is the southern end, you can hop behind the breakwater, and you can take that breakwater for 12, 13 miles. And it's just flat. It's just all the way up to L.A., to the Angel Light. And then you can duck back out into the sea. So there's a little respite right there if the sea is getting a little choppy on you. And so I'm explaining all this stuff to Jerry, and he's taking it all in. And our first trip, we left early in the morning. We ended up getting into Marina Del Rey about 8 o'clock at night, somewhere in that neighborhood. We put the boat in a empty slip overnight. I know the dock master. It was cool. I've got to pop over to my boat, and Jerry got to pop over and check on his wife. And she was doing okay. She was very excited. She seemed calm. She seemed like everything was good. She had recently got some medication, and his head was sort of over there with her. But the next morning, we just, cranked up the engines and took off. We went over to the fuel dock and filled up again. Gas boats use a lot of fuel. And off we went out of Marina Del Rey, and we made our way up to Santa Barbara. Now we got up to Santa Barbara, and the wind was blowing around the point up there like blistering, like 50 knots. And we just sort of tucked into a slip there, went in, paid the fees, and I took Jerry with me. I showed him everything that I did. And this is a part of the training. I said, okay, when you dock a boat, you have to tie it off this way. And, he did. He had a problem in realizing how to do the tie the boat off on the cleat, which is not uncommon. A lot of people do if they haven't done it a lot, especially with the pressure of docking the boat. Like, there's a panic. And I see a lot of captains, they get panicked too when they're docking a boat. You know what? You just get the pointy end and hole, and it'll all work out. All right? There's no steering. You just have to use the throttles. I see people on sailboats, turning their wheel like 1,000 different degrees once they start getting the boat into the slip. You have to understand that for every time that you turn the wheel, there's going to be a delay in what the rudder is going to give a result to you. So you'll be compounding if you're turning really fast like you think you're in a car, which is that's instant, right? You're instantly changing direction. You turn it the other way, you're instantly changing. You go left, you go right. It's really fast. In a boat, you go right, you have to wait. You go left, you have to wait. Wait for the action to happen. That's why you have to anticipate which way the wind is, which way the current is, and how, your glide path, so to speak, because that's really what you're doing is gliding. And the lower the speed, the less the rudder is going to work for you. And a lot of novice boaters don't realize that. So the real control is having the engine, okay? Which way the engine is going forward or reverse, which way your stern is going to kick when it's in reverse, and whatnot. So these are things you have to do. So he was a little bit freaked out by this, and I explained to him, just as I explained to you, kind of what I was doing. And because once I got into a tight area, I never touched the wheel. I had the wheel in midships, and I just used the throttles. I had 2 engines. I could do that all day. I've driven large mega yachts with 2 engines and 2 different bow thrusters. A bow thruster and a stern thruster, and it's, to me, it's second nature. And I always make this mistake when it's second nature to me. I kind of assume that everybody else kind of knows that, and that's really a flaw in the way I think about how people deal with boats. So we had this really serious wind going on, 50 knots, and finally it subsided the next morning, and we decided to take a quick run around. So we took off, and when you get out to the point, and the point up there is called Point Conception. It's sort of where the weather systems divide between Southern California and Central California, which for people on the East Coast probably don't realize this, but it's actually a pretty dramatic change. You have 2 high and low pressure systems that kind of run up against each other, and Point Conception is sort of the point where this all happens. And it could be, I've had some super nasty weather up there, super nasty. But so Jerry was really excited about getting in, and it was, we had the residuals of some fairly big waves. We were going along slow enough. We were comfortable enough. I mean, we weren't getting water over the deck because of the very high freeboard on these Chris Craft. And we were doing okay. And I noticed in his demeanor and his look that once we sort of got to Point Conception, because there's a lot of talk, oh yeah, Point Conception, that's the place, blah, 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 blah. And he started to get really nervous. And we started to have a conversation about this. His PTSD was sort of kicking in when the anxiety of a situation rose, all the rest of that anxiety that he experienced back in Iraq and Afghanistan came back up. So he was kind of fit to be tied and became really a terrible person to be around for that moment. He was very irritable and started worrying about every little detail. And does the engine sound different? How much fuel are we using? Well, what happens? Should I check this and should I do this? And why aren't you upset? And that was the question: is why wasn't I? I wasn't upset because everything was under control. So we went through this period, this intense period, and I've said this before, and I've talked about it in various podcasts and in different ways, that the whole thing about sailing is deeply psychological. Sailing a boat is one thing. The experience of sailing a boat is another. And what you bring to that, some great literature. Robert Stone's Outer Bridge Reach. If you haven't read that, you should read that book. It's a brilliant book. Absolutely a brilliant book. The Secret Sharer by Conrad. A great, real long short story. Great short story. And as a sailor, you need to catch up on this literature and read this literature. And I was trying to explain to Jerry what this whole deal was about. So there's a part, once you get around Point Conception, we were actually heading over to Morro Bay. And we were going to spend the night in Morro Bay, recharge your batteries. And I wanted to check the engines. I wanted to do a thorough, I didn't want to push. We needed more fuel because it's gas engines, suck up the fuel, and these Chris Craft, they don't have very big tanks. And in fact, the tanks sit sort of upright in the stern. It's an interesting configuration, and they both feed the engine. Two tanks feed a day tank, which feeds the engines, and so we were, I'm constantly checking fuel, and actually, let's just top up because from Morro Bay, the next run would be up to Santa Cruz. Or there's a couple of other little tiny places that we could pop into, but anyway, there's a long run. It's a long run by boat, and usually it's very much uphill, and it's very much a difficult trip. So we were talking about probably putting in Monterey. And, going up around Carmel. Most of those car commercials, you see the people driving along the PCH and the Great Bridge and, the beautiful road and all the rest of that. We sail right up. You could see it as you're sailing by. I like to keep some distance between me and the land, especially with an old boat like this, mainly because the further I'm away from the land, the longer it's going to take for me to get to the rocks if something happens to the boat, like the engine's cut off, which in this case is exactly what happened. We took on fuel in Morro Bay, and the fuel station there is a good fuel station. Lots of boats use it, this, that, and other thing. But it seemed like this boat, we had created there was a lot of sediment in the tanks, and it was like probably caked on the bottom, and one of the cakes or the goo that comes out of the gas came up and clogged the filters and the gas filters. And then we started to get a little water in there, and it's like the tanks probably should have been cleaned, but they weren't. So we actually off of Big Sur, the port engine cut off. And Jerry was very good. Once he sort of clicked into that can-do Army, I can make it happen, deal mentally. He was super good. And I said, look, you're just going to have to steer this boat. Let me see what I can do. I went down, I cleaned out the filters, I ran it. They clogged up again, which often happens. I was just waiting for it. And we just sort of came into Monterey Bay. Finally, as we're in Monterey Bay, and I'm at the engines, I'm in the engines, which is you have to kind of crawl under there. So it's not like I can pop my head up and say, hey, how you doing? It was a pain in the ass to get in and out. I got up, and then I got the engines running. It seemed like the fuel was going to be clean. I could check the bulb. It looks like whatever chunk came out was done. And it was just because of the seas had churned something up, and the soot in the bottom of the tank kind of created this problem. But you got to know how to do this kind of stuff. So I'm explaining to Jerry in the nicest way that this is how you do this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, this is great. There's always something that happens with a boat, always some sort of crazy shit. So we went into Monterey, and we pulled up to the fuel dock, and the engine wouldn't shut off. And the engines just kept running. And I had yelled at Jerry when he was tying the boat up because he wasn't doing it right. And I just thought, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I was really tired. And I was getting irritable because of having to deal with his stuff. And, it was just, I was really uncomfortable. And I didn't really mean to bark at him, but I did. And I can bark. Trust me, I can really bark. And I have barked, and, I can bark. Any case, it's not a very good thing, but sometimes it comes in handy. So I got him, and he was really upset by this. And I went down and figured out what was going on. There's for these gas engines, there's a solenoid that has to click off. It's a solenoid before a solenoid. And they're just the little solenoid clicks on, clicks off, clicks on, clicks off. And it turns out that the little hinge that the solenoid contacts was on was just jamming up. It's a very simple thing. And I just unclicked it, and the engine stopped. And so that was something I had to deal with, because to start the engine, I had to go downstairs and manually click the solenoid on to start the engines. This actually was only, I think it was the starboard engine, if I remember correctly. And so that's what we did. So I'm teaching Jerry all this stuff, and he's kind of getting like, and I could see it. He was sort of drowning in the information. And, I'm going, oh, you got to do this, and you can do this, and you can't do this, you do this. This is just. We went out to eat. We had a nice dinner, came back to the boat, cleaned everything up. And the next morning we took off. And he was really uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Finally, we made it all the way up into Oakland. We delivered the boat to the slip, what was waiting for us. And Jerry was like super, super upset. And, we got paid, and I was going to stay a couple of days more and hang out in San Francisco, at Oakland, San Francisco. And so I put Jerry on a plane and flew him home. I got back a couple of days later, and I was very tired. Went to my boat, and I found out that his wife had committed suicide. And she had done so after he had gotten home. He was a wreck. So I went over to the boat, and how you do, what's going on, this, that, another thing, and try to get him, to refocus on where he was going. And there was a lot of things going on. There was, the police and the coroner and the sheriffs and all kinds of stuff like this. And he was just ready to give up. So he and I spent after we had spent all this time taking this boat up and all the training and stuff like this, he and I spent a lot of time talking about where his head was, how he was feeling, the things he had to get over, his wife's problems. They weren't his problems, but, they were her problems. And we went on and went on and went on. And then he said to me, and just sort of like left field kind of comment, we had gone past Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is out near Point Conception. And this is where they landed the space shuttle. The Air Force is out there. They do a lot of work out there. And he looked at me and he goes, I'm going to become an astronaut. I'm going to graduate school and I'm going to become an astronaut. And I said, good on you, man. Good on you. I thought he was just pipe dreaming. But he did say one thing. He says, you got to do, don't assume that somebody knows their stuff. You got to train them up in your way. And I agreed with him. And I apologized for barking again. But he said he learned a lot. And he felt better about the boat. And he was going to sell the boat. And he was going to go back to school. And that was it. That's what he was going to do. And he grieved for his wife. We all did. It was just really sad. And so Jerry, he went to graduate school, and today he's in the astronaut program at NASA. And I had learned quite a bit about the psychological baggage that people bring to boats. Sometimes they're unable to get over it. I mean, what happened to Jerry was really tragic, but I go back to that youthful enthusiasm and the learning and pushing forward and picking it all up. And then something clicked in him. He said, I wasn't going to learn anymore. And he felt really bad about that. And that was an epiphany for him. He realized that he had to keep learning because learning was going to save his life. And it was going to put all those demons in their boxes, and he was going to be able to move forward and be preoccupied by stuff. And his mind needed that kind of stuff. His emotional intelligence needed that kind of exercise. And that's what boating gave to him, a kind of emotional intelligence of being able to sit for long periods of time, to be able to handle problems as they came up, and not to do it and throw your hands up. Oh, I can't fix the engine. I don't know what to do. You train. So the second story that I have to say is about the house painter. And I bring this up in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way. Jason, the house painter. I met Jason, of course, like anybody. I met him on the dock. He was an enthusiastic sailor and racer. He worked a lot on his rig. He wanted to be a rigger. He made his money as a house painter, but not like little houses. He did apartment complexes and stuff. He had like a serious house painting business. Really lovely guy, quick with a smile, very straightforward and honest and nice to be around. And I went out sailing with him a bunch of times. He was out on my boat a bunch of times. We had some great fun. We had a little bit of a falling out over some stuff having to do with a car. I bought a car. It was an old car, and he loved the car. He wanted to buy the car. He bought the car for me, and I hadn't done any work on it. It was an old 1971 Nova, and I was going to fix it up and and then resell it. And he said, "Oh no, I'll do it." And he took it, and then the engine blew up. So he was a little pissed at me for the engine blowing up, which I actually had nothing to do with it. That was that was that. So anyway, I had spent a great deal of time with Jason, training Jason how to do stuff. He came to me after all this incident. He was still, friendly, but a little bit more distant. And he came to me and he said, look, he says, I have this job of driving this big boat. Can you help me, train me? And I did. So I took him out in this 65, it was a 65-foot, what was it? It was a big power boat. Oh, it was a 65-foot Ferretti, which I had driven before. So I took him out and I showed him how to handle the boat. And one of the drills that I do for any mate or captain that's coming onto a new boat is handling drills. Big boats react a little bit differently than smaller boats. And I will be the first to admit that I had driven, the largest boat I've driven was 260 feet, a mega yacht with a helicopter on the back. And it's a whole different animal to drive one of those boats, to dock it, undock it, move it around. It's just a different an approach that you have to have. And if you're by yourself in that sort of mid-range between 50 and 90 or 50 and 105, and you have a power boat or a sailboat, it's not any more difficult, and in fact, it's less difficult than handling a smaller boat. And I say that because when I first got a job working for Vessel Assist as a captain, which was a great job, I learned more about small boat handling, doing that, handling smaller boats in tight areas, than I did when I ran tugs in New York Harbor. There's certain parallels to it and familiarity I had. But anyway, there is a lot to handling a small boat, learning on a small boat, and it's much more difficult than a bigger boat. So never think because there's a big boat that, I can't handle it because I don't have the experience. It'll come, and it's actually easier to handle because a bigger boat will often sit where it's supposed to be. Okay? It's not going to be affected that much by wind like a small sailboat. Like a 27-foot Catalina could be more difficult to dock than say a 65-foot powerboat. That's just the nature of the beast. So anyway, Jason had come to me and asked me, and I took him out. And there's a quarantine buoy that is out in the middle of Marina del Rey. So I took him out and I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the points of the compass. You're going to drive up to the buoy with your bow. You're going to stop in front of the bow, and then you're going to move the boat around. You can go either port or starboard, but you're going to move the boat around. Beware of the wind. Not much current, but beware of the wind. And you're going to just keep the nose of the boat on, and you're just going to maneuver your boat all the way around in a circle around the buoy. And the buoy's just there for reference so that you can do that. And he went ahead and he started to do it. And he had some difficulties doing it. Had a problem getting a couple of the bow thruster to work a certain way, but he eventually got it, and he became much better at it. Well, eventually, this is like maybe a year later after I taught him that, because he was driving this boat, and he had gotten his captain's license. He was doing really well. He ended up driving the Catalina Ferry, which is a ferry that leaves Marina del Rey and goes to Catalina. It's about a 40-mile run, and it's a hydrofoil. It's a big deal, and I was very proud of him. I mean, I didn't see him very much. It's the boating world. And he took off, and that's what he did. And he gained a lot of experience going back and forth between Catalina and Marina del Rey. He did that for a few years. So he was getting his dream of being like a professional marine captain. So I was thinking, okay, one more guy taught, one more mate off. He's got his captain's license. He's working professionally. He's doing a great job. He's learning a lot of stuff, and he's getting some great experience. Happy with him. Happy he's going there. I'm off doing my own thing. In fact, I was doing a couple of movies at the time, and he was just he'd gone from house painter to Marine captain. So he gave me a call, and this is a very interesting thing because Jason's experience went as far as the local waters. He had never been past Point Conception. He had never been further. I think he had been down to San Diego once. I think he sailed down there. He had been to Catalina. But he had sort of been in this one area in Southern California. So he got a job to take a little powerboat, 36-foot diesel, twin diesels in it, to go from Marina del Rey and take it down to Cabo San Lucas. And he came by the boat and he says, look, I got this job. It pays really well. It's for a very famous producer, TV producer. And so I'm going to take the boat down there, and I need help. I need a mate that I can count on. And I said, sure, I'll go with you. No worries. So I figure I'm just going as a mate, which means that for me, given the amount of experience, I could have done this boat by myself. I could have, I was going to sleep most of the way, read, do some fishing, cook, eat, drink, whatever, and just enjoy myself going down to Cabo. Because I thought, Jason's, he's got his act together. He's a good captain. He knows what he's going to do, and this, that, and other thing. Again, the psychological comes into it. The reason Jason asked me to go with him is because he was incredibly insecure about making this passage and being in a foreign country with a boat. And I was the only one who, in the area that had as much experience. There wasn't anybody really that had more experience than I did as far as traveling internationally. And so we're going down, and then we had a little weather situation. It was at night. It was blowing really hard. And I get up. I was asleep. I get up. Boat's rocking around. I come up, get up on the into the fly bridge, and Jason's eyes are as big as saucers. I said, dude, what's the matter? Oh, we're going to have to abandon ship. I mean, we're talking total panic. We got to get the life raft out. We got to do this. I said, why? We're going along at like 15, 20 knots. The engines are running, plenty of fuel, plenty of wet. There's no sinking here. What's going on? He was in a total panic, like a total panic. So I finally got him calmed down. I said, dude, what's the matter? Oh, I can't handle the boat. The boat's doing this, it's doing that. And I said, okay, well, let's just do it this way. So I take the boat. And one of the things when you're in a big ocean, and this was a big ocean, don't get me wrong, it was intense, is to take the boat and find a comfortable place where to run. Because it's not going to bother you. What was happening was we had very serious offshore wind, and Mexico is very hot. The land really heats up. And at night, you can get the wind coming off of the land, and the offshore winds will just blow stink. And they'll kick up some serious, short-term waves until they kind of peter out. We're in that zone in which everything was all screwed up. High wind, choppy, horrible rolling seas, contrary seas going against the current, contrary seas going from land to ocean, ocean to land. It was just ridiculous. So I said, dude, let's do this. So I said, well, why don't you let me steer for a little while? So I jumped on the helm, and I turned the boat. he was like on the course. That's all he wanted to do, is on the course, and he was ready to get the life raft out. So I just turned the boat and I started to find the comfortable spot. And the next thing you know, we're running with the waves. We're off course a little bit. We're still going south. We're actually going more south, where the course calls for more southeast. So we're only going to be off a few degrees until we get past, because it's a very definite area. And I was explaining to him that in some cases when you're coastal sailing, you'll have these wind events. I talked about the Catabatic Wind. You get to standard offshore winds. Sometimes the mountains behind, sometimes the deserts that are way inland have a tendency to build up these big heat events, and the wind kicks up and it comes across, it meets the cold water, and it can get quite violent. I turned a boat and found a comfortable spot where to go. But what this showed me is, despite all the training that Jason had, I mean, everything that he had gone through, all the stuff that I had taught him, psychologically, he was not prepared to do this job. Because the first sign of distress, he was in a panic. He was ready to abandon. I mean, literally was ready to pop the life raft and get in it, even though the boat was perfectly well. And I had to explain to him, and this is, of course, I think the reason I was there, is to assuage his fears and his panic. So eventually he kind of got it together. We had a couple of other really small problems, but they were easily handled. The boat ran really well. We got down to Cabo, and all Jason wanted to do is get me off that boat. He was so embarrassed that I had seen this flaw in his psychology that I wasn't. We had docked the boat, and he was already talking about me going to the airport in 20 seconds after we got the boat docked. I thought I was going to hang out in Cabo for a day or two, but no. It was like, oh, the owner's going to be here, you have to go. I said, okay. So I did. I left. I left him in Cabo. I got on a plane. I flew home. And I saw him much later. And I never brought up the whole thing, but I could always see when I looked into his eyes that I saw that fear and that panic. And he later shifted from going towards a marine career into becoming an engineer and a boat repair guy, and starting a business there, which he's done extremely well. Still sails locally, but he doesn't do anything big like that. So it's very interesting to see how psychologically and metaphysically these things can pop up and change one's life. It changed his life to be presented with the fact that he couldn't handle his fear. Whereas Jerry, the astronaut, he learned to deal with his fear, even despite all the tragedy. And he learned about emotional intelligence. Justin didn't learn about emotional intelligence. He said, okay, I can't, I'll panic again. I won't be able to do it. That's it. I'm done. And that's what he did. So he went off to being a boat repair mechanic. It's interesting. And so the third story I want to talk about, and I know I'm probably droning on a little bit here, but follow me with it, is I'm going to call Workmanship Guaranteed. And this story, I had worked on a boat. One of the things you do as a Marine guy is you'll take on certain jobs. I painted a boat. It was a 35-foot Catalina, whatever. I had painted the boat, the whole boat, inside and outside. I had done some different work on some of the pumps and rebuilt the whole boat, essentially, and it worked out really well. The boat looked great when I was finished, and the owner was a complete freaking nut, and it was great fun. I got paid very well, and I enjoyed it. to a certain extent. And I said, fine, great. Okay, that's it. About 2 years later, he sold the boat and recommended me to deliver this boat to San Francisco and actually Oakland again. And, go up past Point Conception, Monterey, Moonlight Bay, all the way up. And the two guys had zero sailing experience. I would say the one guy, Adam, had more experience, but not really a lot of experience to start with. The other guy, he was a cook. And he was he was going to be a cook on the boat, and he was his best friend. They're two gay guys, very funny, thought this would be a great adventure, and they were going to do it themselves, and gun-ho, gun-ho, gun-ho. And I took on the job because they paid me very well for this job. And I thought, well, okay, I do know this boat. And so I checked it out. The engine everything seemed to be, in good working order, which is always a problem when it's a risk you take when you deliver boats. It's a lot of things you may not see. You could check everything out, but, you're not going to know what it is until it breaks. So anyway, I got these guys on the boat, and, I thought, okay, this is going to be a lot of fun. Off we went. And I was teaching them about this and teaching them about that. I was showing them how to, we'd had the sails up and we sailed up to Santa Barbara, and, it was blowing stink again up there at Point Conception. And we literally had to wait 3 or 4 days in Santa Barbara before we could get around the corner. But it ended up, we had a problem with the engine. The engine kept cutting out, kept having fuel problems. Kept having electronic problems. It was a diesel engine, but there was a lot of problems with this boat, the engine. Finally, I thought we had it all fixed up. The cook actually shorted out most of the electricity, trying to put left a cooking heating plate on, and almost burned the boat down through the inverter. And I told him not to do that. And it was endless of all the little problems that were coming up. So we finally got out of Morro Bay, got around Point Conception, got around Morro Bay. And I'm not expecting much from these guys, but I am expecting from Adam to drive the boat straight. Okay. So I had to go up on deck. It was we got up to Big Sur. And you have to get around a corner to get into Monterey, okay? And Monterey Bay can be a very ugly bay. And we're working and we're tacking and we're working. We got the wind on the nose, and so I had to go up on the foredeck because they didn't want to go up on the foredeck because it was too dangerous. But it's what I do. So I went up and I was reefing in the jib, and I got up there, and Adam is sitting there talking to his other buddy, and they're having giggles over there, and they're not paying attention to me being on the foredeck. They had no idea. And thank God I had on my safety harness. All right. I was strapped in, and I'm out there on the deck. I'm getting pummeled with water coming over and I had them turn the boat around. I'm yelling at them. Could you do this? Could you turn here? Could you pay attention? And they're not paying attention to me. I went up, gravity the boat lifted me off. I was literally off the boat as the deck went away from me. I hit the rail, okay? And I flipped over the rail, and I was hanging onto the front of the boat on the outside. My feet were in the water. I was the boat rose again. I kind of, the gravity took me up. It was like this crazy up and down roller coaster kind of thing. And I finally got myself back on the boat. These two guys didn't even know that I was off the boat and hanging over the front. They were just sitting there and they were talking about some sort of recipe to cook for the day. and where they were going to go in Monterey to eat and all sorts of different stupid stuff. I was so infuriated. I actually got the whole thing reefed down, and we started to go, and I wanted to take the boat into Monterey. We got there, the engines started to cut out again. I was so frustrated with these guys because they weren't paying serious attention. They almost got me killed. And so we finally got into Monterey. We got into the dock. I literally had to sail the boat because the engine cut out again. And I literally had to sail the boat onto the dock in Monterey and lasso the cleat to stop the boat. And these guys still couldn't. I just said, you stand here at the main. When I say drop the main, you just drop the main. He says, okay. I'm going along. We're getting closer to the dock. I've got speed. I don't need to sail. I said, drop the main. And he stands there and looks at me like, huh? I said, drop the main. And we're still got a lot of speed. We need to scrub speed off because we're going to plow into this dock, right? I mean, I won't hit the dock, but I'll go on the side of the dock. Finally, he drops the sail. I lasso the cleat as we're flying by, tie it off real fast, and we stop like a rubber band man. I get the other guy. He throws the line out onto the dock. For whatever reason, there was nobody there to catch it. So I hop off the boat. I grab the line out of the water because it had fallen in the water. The bow's sort of drifting off the dock. And finally, I got the boat tied up. And I said, listen, guys, I said, you're close enough to San Francisco right now that you could do this in increments. You could sail from here to Santa Cruz and have a lovely afternoon sail. You can go to Santa Cruz to Moon Bay and have a lovely afternoon sail. And then from Moon Bay to San Francisco and have a lovely afternoon sail. You have enough experience. It's up to you. I'm not doing this anymore for you. These guys were unteachable. They didn't belong on boats. They didn't belong on a delivery. When you really have weather problems, mechanical problems, you need to do it all. You need to be able to have all. And teaching these guys anything was just ridiculous because they didn't have the attention span. Maybe the attention span of an ant, but that was it. So these are 3 stories. They eventually got their boat up to San Francisco. They're fine. I got on a plane in Monterey and flew home. I was done with them. It was taking way too much time. I didn't get my delivery bonus, which usually happens at the end. And I just, that was it. I wasn't going to do this anymore. I had no time. I had no patience. I had no charm left. Period. I was done. So there's 3 ways here. This intelligence, this emotional intelligence I speak of. And there's always the technical stuff. So we saw that in the stories that Justin didn't have a great deal of technical experience, but he learned, and learning kept his emotional intelligence growing. Jason had a great deal of technical experience, but he didn't have the emotional intelligence to solve a problem, to realize that he wasn't in jeopardy and that things could be okay. He had a panic button that he couldn't deal with. And then these other 2 guys who don't deserve to be on a boat, who had absolutely no regard for life and are more in their own heads, doing what they do. And this is not to say anything against gay people at all. I've sailed with a lot of really great gay sailors. And, I raced in the Southern Ocean on the French team Le Club. And 2 of the guys on there were just freaking awesome sailors, and both were gay. So there's not that issue that I'm bringing up. It's just that this happened to be who these two guys were. Any case, the story is you really, as a captain, and for yourself as a regular boater, or a marine captain, as you're going, is training is the key. You have to train both technically. You have to train as well as being able to emotionally be ready for whatever comes up, and to when you're in the breach, learn how to deal with the problems that you have. And this comes through experience, but it's also part of growth. You have to grow yourself into these kinds of things. And anyway, that's it for today on Offshore Explorer with Scott Dawson. I want to thank Paulette McWilliams for the music in the beginning. And go buy my books. I appreciate it. You'll find that on offshoreexplorer.org. You'll find the book there and the link to go get the book. I'll have more for Christmas, and thank you very much. And I'll see you. I'll see you real soon. And I hope you have some calm seas and fair winds. It's Offshore Explorer.